Everybody for tuning in to Coder Conversations once again. Catch up on any previous episode at coderconvos.com or send us a message at coderconversations@gmail.com. I'm your host, Kevin, and on today's show, we have technologist and entrepreneur John Hazel returning. Welcome back, man.
Hey, thanks. Good to be back.
Yeah, man. It's been a second, man. And the last time you were on, you were doing things with the church, and unfortunately, that came to an end. So, like, what have you been doing since then?
Yeah, so that would have been in 2023 probably. And in late 2023, I transitioned off of that church staff and switched to self-employed for a little while. And then I took a role as chief of staff for a small company called Ice Barrel, which manufactures cold plunges. Well, more branding and marketing and stuff, but so cold plunges and then chillers that you hook into the barrels to keep the water cold. So if you haven't ever heard of cold therapy, check it out. And earlier this year, Iceboro got acquired by Sunlight and Saunas. So I'm still on that team, and I still work closely with the founder of Ice Barrel on that stuff, as well as on several other new startups that we're working on. And then I still have my business, Hazel Eyes, doing web design and web development. I've kind of been trying to expand into AI consulting as well, because I use AI every day, and I just see a lot of businesses that are underutilizing it, or they're utilizing it in ways that just are not that effective. I also was living in the North Dallas area the last time that we talked, back to Colorado, which is kind of where I'm from. I just couldn't do another Texas summer. It was too hot. The mosquito bites were ridiculous. So now I'm back in Colorado, where it's cool year round, and there's not a lot of bugs. So at least not in the suburbs. So
Awesome, man. It's
it's
like for
good.
those who aren't too aware of your history, like what were you doing at the church, and how did you like take some of those skills and apply it to what you're doing now?
I was experience lead, so I kind of over everything that happened online for the church, whether our live events on a weekend service, the live streams, to we launched a metaverse campus that I oversaw, and then the website. Of course, the website and the app were the biggest part of the job. There's just tons to do with that. um, so kind of all those digital aspects. And previously I had worked for a long time at a church as IT director, managing all those things, as well as like actually running cable and networking, programming switches, and just kind of anything technical that popped up, anything that had electricity running through it, basically I would help with. So
So how does like working in the church space differ from what you've experienced in corporate America, or is it pretty similar?
um I mean, it's kind of similar. The like the culture is obviously a lot different, and for me, I kind of I tend to prefer um, the private sector, and just being able to I don't know, just focus on what we're getting done. Like, unfortunately, um, or fortunately and unfortunately, in the church world, there's just a lot of navigating people problems, which you're going to have everywhere. But in the corporate world, you're very much like focused on an objective, and you kind of you unite around that objective, hopefully. Now, there's a lot of like toxic work cultures out there, obviously, where um, that's not the case. But I guess I enjoy being able to just be more blunt and more focused and more just straightforward. I send 5-word, 10-word emails and Slack messages, and I don't have to like really be careful about my tone and everything, and navigate all these kind of people challenges. It's more just like, let's just get it done. So there's that element. I also like being able to kind of unapologetically focus on increasing money. Like, that's a taboo, obviously, topic in the church world, or the nonprofit world in general. But when you're working at a startup, like the goal is like we need to make a bunch of money for our investors and for ourselves, and that's just unapologetic. So I've kind of I've like moved more in that direction where I'm like, yeah, I want to be very successful financially and in business, and don't feel like I have to hide that.
So like in terms of digital experiences, do you feel like there's a huge gap in what churches are currently doing, what they could be doing? Like could they be, utilizing certain tools to spread their message better or increase engagement or, just creating a better overall experience for, believers and non-believers alike to interact with the church?
Yeah, absolutely. But I felt that and believed that while I was still working in the church world. And in fact, like the church that I was working at most recently is an amazing church, one community church in the North Dallas area, and they're like the best, one of the best, in the world um, at just like being uh, objective oriented and really like caring about reaching more people, and kind of not letting anything get in the way of that, but like we're gonna reach more people and anything available, any technology platform or whatever. I mean, the at Ice Barrel, we spend a lot of money every month on meta ads, and it's a very it's lucrative. It works. Like we get a grad spend, um, but I think yeah. Anyways, so there's that piece, and then also like before I worked at this last church, I worked in sales. I might have talked about that a little bit on the last podcast, but um, that was a place where I really learned a lot about that the churches can use to be intentional with reaching people. But again, one community implements a lot of those tactics very strategically. Um, but yeah, it's just and there like the bottom line is two things: is like sowing and reaping. Like you have to recognize that the um, the harvest that you're going to reap, like when you're going to suddenly have a lot of clients or have a lot of business, a lot of income, like that doesn't happen suddenly. It happens because of over time you keep sowing seeds, you keep watering, and you don't know what is going to reap, right? And so I kind of like learned that in sales. And so when I went self-employed for the second time in 2023, I was attending a ton of networking meetings, um, but well, not a ton, but a decent amount every week, at least one or two. And it's interesting because it was like 8 months later when I now had a full-time gig, but was still had kind of moved my business back to the side again, when all that networking started to pay off. And it actually ended up, the majority of the payoff came through someone who at face value is a competitor. She is a sales rep for a company that does it's a marketing agency, and so they do websites as well, but their websites are very specific. They're just like small business informational websites. They can't do like complex functionality and custom dev and all this stuff. They use a specific platform that's like in-house, and so but there was a synergy there because she was like, well, basically anybody that I can't that has a specific website need that goes outside of what my company offers, I'm going to refer to you. It's like, well, that's awesome. And then months later, that started to really pay off, where she's given me like 5 or 6 different leads over the last 2 years, and one of them ended up becoming like a really strong retainer client for a long time, like 14, 16 months or so. So you just never know, and sometimes I get tempted to kind of shrink back and be like, you know what, I'm good with the people that I know and am in community with. And it's like, no, I need to recognize that you never know who the next synergistic relationship is going to be with. And like, I should always be open to connecting with more people and seeing what might develop.
Yeah, so you kind of mentioned planting the seeds before you reap the harvest, and in terms of networking and getting deals and things out of that nature. That's definitely true. You can't just stay in your comfort zone. So you have to intentionally put yourself out there. So for someone who's just getting started and wanting to do effective networking, like what kind of events should they be attending? Like what level of preparedness should they have? Like should they have their business cards and everything lined up? And how should they conduct themselves? What should they be asking?
Yeah. I mean, in an ideal world, yes, like, and it's so easy to these days. Like, I invested maybe, I don't know, like 5 hours, probably tops, back in 2023, like kind of revamping and prepping for, um, developing my network again in the business world. And so, I went on Canva and design, like found a template, designed something for a business card. I wouldn't even say that's essential. That's secondary. The primary thing would be I would go to hihello .com, or you can use any of the, like there's a bunch like Blink, or there's a bunch of digital business cards things. I really like Hi Hello because it's free, and and like the free version is actually really quality. And I have, the digital business card is one, it's in my Apple wallet, so I can literally just double click here, and then pull it up, and then they can just scan it. So it's like it's within 3 seconds at any time. I also have it as a notification or a widget in my notification center. So I think I do. It's gone. It disappeared. I have to put it back. But it's really good. So I use that. I'd say get a digital business card at least. And then yeah, hop on Canva, pull up a template. By the way, this is just like a tip for anybody that's not really a designer but needs to dabble in design. Is like and this goes for any kind of design. So like Canva, for the most part, is so template driven, but where people go wrong is they stray from the template, and it's like you might as well have just designed the thing in PowerPoint, because you just like decided I'm going to do this and this and this, and you randomize it so much that you lost what originally looked good with when the graphic designer that designed the template made it. So I do the same thing. Sometimes I build like websites in WordPress using Elementor, Beaver Builder, Divi, and I try to find a solid template and stick as closely to that as possible, because an expert graphic designer did that. And I have a little bit of a design eye, but not enough to design something from scratch really well. And so, anyway, and then um, you know, you don't even need a website. Like you just set up a link tree, or something like that, where at least you can link people to something about you. Canva also has websites. If you do, I don't mean for this to be an ad for Canva, but it's pretty great. I've done several websites through Canva. They're very simple, very basic, and you can't even like embed a form. But for just like a quick, I need an informational business website, that's a good strategy. Um, and then go on meetup.com and just literally just search like business in your area, depending on where you live. So like if you're in the Dallas area, or I mean any large metroplex, Denver, whatever, if you're in a large metroplex area, the opportunities are basically endless. Like there's so many different things you could do. um, I'm back in Colorado Springs, and there's not a lot of options here, so I went on Meetup and I added every single thing I could to my calendar, which was all of like 10 things. But it turns out one of them is called Exponential Impact, and they're actually a business accelerator. So like Y Combinator is a startup incubator that I follow out in the like Silicon Valley, San Francisco area, and so I listen to their podcasts all the time, and finding out what's going on in the tech startup world. And this is cool because right here in Colorado Springs, there's something like that. It's much smaller. It's a nonprofit, but I'm getting to connect with all these tech entrepreneurs in the area. Some of them are driving down from Denver even. So it's like it's that valuable. And then they've had every third Thursday they have a pitch night. So if you're trying to get into business, in particular like building a startup, like building a new product or a new service on the market. Obviously, this is different from if you're trying to get into agency work, but they have a pitch competition every third Thursday. So I attend that and I get to hear other people and get ideas for like how to pitch my business a little bit better, how to what kind of product I want to build, and just kind of like brainstorm with these people and just network and connect. And so that's a lot of fun. You can likely find something like that if you're in any big metroplex. And then just like I'm an introvert, by the way. I'm an INTP on the Myers-Briggs, and so the key is that like everybody is both introverted and extroverted. So as an INTP, that means that my driver function is introverted thinking, which is all about like logic and frameworks, and it's all about the internal world. So I have to do like a lot of processing to build those things out. But then that means if your driver function is introverted, then your co-pilot function is extroverted. So my co-pilot function is extroverted intuition, which is all about exploration and patterning things. And so when I'm extroverting and connecting with people, I'm patterning. I'm like trying to learn a little bit about them and then pattern how does that connect with my life, or what would be and I like activate my curiosity with people and just try like ask more questions to connect. And so I would say even if you're highly introverted, like this is it, networking is such a valuable skill. Even if you have like high anxiety stepping into it, and you're going there by yourself, like just push yourself out of your comfort zone, connect with people. And I promise you, like by the time you go to your fifth networking event, even as 5 different ones, like you're probably going to hit a point where you're like comfortable not knowing anybody in the room and being able to just walk up and introduce yourself. And by the way, a little trick, I might sometimes I say, hey, I'm John, just as like an introduction, but I actually try not to exchange names until I've had a good conversation with somebody, because then I can remember their name. If we start with names, I'm really like I'm focused on the conversation and like trying to get curious and connect with somebody, and it's harder to like remember their name. Of course, you could do the like repeat their name as many times as possible and all those little tricks, but for me, I try to like not even worry about names until the end of a conversation. And even if that we do say each other's names at the beginning, just know that like everybody forgets names. So don't feel bad saying, remind me your name one more time. Like never feel bad about that. Just even if you've met somebody before and it's been weeks or whatever, um, like everybody forgets. So it's not a big deal. Um, let's see. Yeah. Anyway, there's probably a lot of things I could say. Also, like at a lot of networking meetings, they will have like a 30-second pitch. Keep this as simple as possible, and just know you'll dial it in at some point. And so don't feel overwhelmed by this. Like just say I'm John Hazel. I do web design and web development. At some point, I came up with a clever tagline and said, if you want to capture their eyes, build with Hazel eyes, and that like helps stick in people's minds. But like just keep it simple, and don't try to the best thing to do is to like just tell the briefest story you can. If there's like a quick story you can about how you helped somebody, if it's something that can be told in under 30 seconds, that's great. Know that like there are very structured networking meetings, and there are unstructured ones. I prefer the unstructured because I just want to focus on connecting with people. But some people like the structure, and so but visit them all. So I've visited BNI, I've visited Master Networks. Today I visited a new one I've never heard of called 4BR, and it was okay. It's the the structured ones. A lot of times are like an hour and a half to 2 hours, which is a lot of time to give, and it was like not really worth it today. But like at least I'm putting in the effort, and that's what I'm saying about sowing seeds. Like I put in the effort, and I know that like months from now the effort of networking is going to pay off, right?
So, like you kind of mentioned the sowing seeds part, and No, just to give people the reality of the networking events. You're not necessarily going to just go to one and then you're going to have, tons of business. But
Not
like,
at all.
what does it really look like to, like, when you start procuring business? Like, maybe it's a few networking events. You talk to somebody, you have a good conversation, you introduce your product, your business, your services, and just because they like you, they want to explore more. How does that how does it typically look when you start getting a bite, when somebody starts wanting your service?
Yeah, I try to. Most of the time, you're not going to be able to connect with everybody. Hopefully, ideally, when I come to a meeting, it's like at least 15 to 20 people. The one I went to today was like 6 or 8 people, and so, but regardless, I'm trying to pick out throughout the time. And like for Christians um, listening, I'm really praying about it, and I'm like, Holy Spirit, highlight who I should connect with. Um, but I'm picking 1 to 3 people. I'm also like, if it's a structured networking meeting, you get to like the advantage of that is that you get to hear what everybody does. And some of these like BNI and 4BR, they actually hand you a paper with a roster of everybody and what they do. And BNI actually gives you phone numbers and emails. So even in just one networking meeting, it's like, wow, I just got a dozen leads basically, and you just handed them to me. That's amazing. Um, so I'm kind of figuring out like who do I want to connect with, and there's two different types of people that I'm connecting with. Like one is just um, okay, this like if somebody says I'm just getting started or something like that, that's a key word that's like, oh, they might need a website. The other thing is if they're in an adjacent space with me, if they're in the web industry, if they're in the marketing industry, anywhere kind of close to me, then that's interesting to me because there could be a synergy, like I talked about with that one lady. Um, so I'm kind of picking those out, and I'm trying to hit like at least 2 to 3 people where I'm going to actually exchange contact info. And even if I can, depending on how much like time we have, because with a structured meeting, you've got maybe like 15 minutes on the front, max 30, and 15 to 30 minutes on the back. So it's not a ton of time. So if I can, though, I'm trying to go ahead and schedule a one-on-one with between 1 and 3 of them on the spot, because then the next action is already in place. If I can't, then as regardless, as soon as I get in my car, I'm grabbing the business cards. Um, like the best time to do this is literally as soon as you get out of the meeting, is the business cards or the digital business cards, and I'm adding them all to my contacts. And then right now, I'm using a CRM called Close, which I've used in the past. I really like it. But whether you're using Close or HubSpot or even just your phone contacts, like if you're not ready for a CRM, you can build your own very simple CRM in your phone contacts. And here's how you do it: you create a contact group, and you can do this now. It took Apple way too long to do this, but finally, like 5 years ago, they added the ability to do lists or groups in your contacts. I used to use a separate app for that, but you just create a list that's like one dash prospects or leads. You can call them prospects or leads. Two dash active, and 3 dash inactive is fine. So that's like the bare minimum you need. There's other ways you could structure it, but basically you have one is your prospects or leads, and so these are people that you've connected with, and you want to pursue them to see if one, maybe they're going to be a good source of referrals for you, or there will be some other kind of partner type synergy, or two, they're a potential client or customer. And so every single week on whatever day you choose, for me it's usually Monday, but every week you're looking at your number one prospects group, and you're tapping each person and texting and saying, following up like, hey, it was great connecting with you at the networking meeting last Thursday. I would love to schedule a one-on-one, just to connect and get to know what you do a little bit better. Do you have any time this week or next week? It's good to like give some level of finite, or you can even say, I'm free, Wednesday and Thursday from 11 to 4 this week, or Monday and Tuesday this time frame next week. That's even better because you're giving them solid options. You're not going to have a lot of back and forth, and it's, you don't want to you don't want them to get annoyed before you even have your first meeting. um, and then two is active. These are your active clients, and so those people you're also connecting with every week, or depending on the relationship, and what's needed, maybe it's every 2 weeks, or even once a month if it's like a longer term, less structured retainer. But those people you're regularly reaching out to and checking in on and making sure they're satisfied with their services. And then three, the inactive. And so the inactive, every 6 months you're following up with those people. So so like once a month you go in your inactive and you look for the people that I haven't reached out to in a while. And early on you can do this kind of from your head and just be like, yeah, I don't want to talk to that person. Yes, let me reach. It's been a while with this person. Maybe things have changed. And you'd be surprised how much changes in 6 months. And just the fact that you remembered them and that you're reaching back out to them, it's amazing how many people will actually be like, you know what? Yes, actually, I just was thinking I need a web designer, or I just talked to someone yesterday who's starting up a business and they need a web designer, right? And by the way, this is something that like I learned in my sales role, but I actually used it in church a lot because our church was very big on everybody should be plugged in, connected, and supporting the mission of the church and volunteering. And so I would every Sunday morning I would be out there connecting with people, and my goal was to like have three really solid connections, between 5 and 15 like total connections, because you don't know which ones are going to pan out. And so those people, sometimes I would be like, hey, do you want to come to my digital experience meeting, just a brief Zoom call so we can get to know each other a little bit better. And some people would come on, and then nothing would happen, and they weren't interested, they were too busy, whatever. 6 months later I'd reach out to them and they'd be like, I really need to connect with in community with the church, and so I'm so glad you reached out, right? So there you go.
Awesome, man. So like from like if you could kind of define your core services, I know you do like web design, web development, business consulting. Like what services do you actually offer, and like how are you bringing value to small businesses? Because I'm assuming this is predominantly the space that you're working in right now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, everybody needs a website. um, Now though, with AI, I'm able to do a lot of things a lot faster. And so I I now am able to, there's a lot of like really small businesses where it's just, just somebody that's starting something up, a nonprofit or something for themselves, and they're bootstrapping it, which means that they're coming out of pocket for it, right? Um, they don't have investors, and so I can now offer websites for extremely cheap that I wouldn't have been able to do before. And basically what I've like built out a workflow where I have a chat bot. So I used to use a Google form to like ask people all these questions that would help me craft a great website. Well, now I have a chat bot that it's a extremely structured workflow. So it's like an old school chatbot, not just an AI general chatbot, but it's a like a block builder, kind of like Zapier or N8N, where you're creating this canvas and you're connecting the dots. And so I have like a question, and then once they answer, and I tell them like, just answer it stream of consciousness, first thing that comes to mind, you'll have the ability to refine it. And then once they hit send, the chatbot will ask them and present two buttons, and one button says, um, do you, or finalize your answer, and the other button says brainstorm with AI. So if they click brainstorm with AI, then and here's the advantage versus them just kind of using ChatGPT by themselves, is that I'm injecting like principles and authors and thought leaders that I align with in the prompt. So they're saying, I don't know, like let's say somebody is starting up, let's just say they're starting up like a landscaping business, and they just say, um, I'm I'm passionate about, helping people. Like, let's say the question is about, what are you passionate about, or like, what's your vision? And they just say I'm passionate about helping people feel great when they walk to their door, walk to their garage. Like, I want them to just have peace every time they step out on their front porch. And let's say that's kind of their answer for vision. If they say brainstorm with AI, it's going to send that to the AI. It's going to say, here's the user's answer. Um, Ask the user 3 questions, leveraging the story brand strategy from Donald Miller, and the vivid vision strategy, and which is another book. And so, like, and this is another kind of this is a principle of using AI very effectively, is when you can give something that uses a small amount of tokens, but it actually produces a lot of context without filling up the context window. It's like you're giving it all of this context to work with, but it doesn't cost hardly anything of the actual context window. So by saying like story brand and like specific frameworks, or saying like I'm an INTP on the Myers-Briggs, you give it all of this knowledge all of a sudden about you specifically, or about how to respond specifically, but you're not eating up that context window. Because if you've ever had a conversation long enough with ChatGPT, eventually it starts to feel like you're talking to someone with dementia, because like ChatGPT will forget what you were talking about in the beginning of the conversation and just kind of lose its track. And so when you can do that and you can keep things tight and focused that way, then it's very effective. So anyway, the chatbot will take them through interactively and essentially provide the job that would require several hours of consulting verbal conversations from me. And so now I don't have to charge them hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars of consulting fees. I can just send them through that workflow, and then I can drop it in an AI agentic website builder and just have it build. And then, like, if they're not paying a lot of money, then I'm not doing a ton of extra custom work with that. It's just like kind of usually one shot's a pretty good one, and we go from there. But let's see, did that answer your question? I don't know what your question was actually.
Yeah, yeah. Just kind of like mentioning some of the value that you bring to small businesses. I know, like, when a lot of businesses think about websites, they pretty much think about a marketing website, like it's like a
Yeah.
brochure for their business. But I know that they can be much more comprehensive, have much more functionality, such as even managing contacts and things of that nature, scheduling, etc. So, like, what are some of the value that you're able to bring to a business that they may not be aware of on the website, the web development front?
Yeah, exactly. I've kind of gone all over the place with that. Like, I started out doing WordPress websites, basic informational websites, and then one time I refactored a Ruby website into a WordPress website so that their marketing and communications team could start to maintain the content of the website without having to go through the development and IT team all the time. And then I've worked on a web app that basically is like a local meal prep and food delivery. Actually, not even just meal prep. It's like they make full ready to eat meals, ready to heat and eat meals that you pop in the fridge. You do it weekly, and so you'll get like 3 meals that are that's going to stay good in the fridge for 5 days. And they were just like local and would deliver directly to people's houses. And so the web app actually um, allowed them to like schedule which days they wanted, and it managed the delivery routes and all that kind of stuff. So that's like a custom web app example. I'm currently building a custom web app for a small startup that's just kind of on the cutting edge in the fintech space. That's fun. Can also do mobile apps, and so it really just depends on what the client needs. Like, I have a great team and an ever expanding team, and depending on who I get to connect with and what their needs are, I'll scale. And so I really love the consulting piece a lot, the organizational business consulting, and just like I said, as an INTP, I tend to really distill things down into simple frameworks. And I love when I find an existing framework. So, I've mentioned StoryBrand, I mentioned Myers-Briggs. Specifically, there's a website called Personality Hacker, and they have what's called the CAR model that all of a sudden Myers-Briggs made so much sense and gave me so much value. Whereas before it was just like, okay, it's a lot of information, but it doesn't really help me. Working Genius by Patrick Lencioni, I absolutely love. Four Disciplines of Execution is an amazing tool. So I'll like take all these different frameworks and that are in my knowledge bank, and when I'm working with somebody, I like to shadow and kind of see how their day is flowing, ask them questions, and find out where their pain points are, and kind of bring in a framework that supports that, and then help them. And then also just some of the basic stuff, like it's amazing how many people don't have a clipboard manager on their computer. Like that is an essential tool that should be built into every OS. If you've ever like cut something out of Google Docs and went to paste it somewhere else, and you copied something else, and then all of a sudden it's completely gone. I know Google Docs is a bad example because you have version history, but that I know has happened to people, and it's like clipboard manager all day. So sometimes it's some of those basic things. I want to help people be more efficient and effective.
So like realistically with like some of these out of the box solutions, Shopify, WordPress plugins, what kind of functionality is available typically versus what would something like what would you need like real coding for, like actual
Yeah,
coding, like because it's not available in the out of box solution.
yeah. Um, so I guess I'll say what like I'll go the other way and say what are the things you can do. So e-commerce all day, right? So if somebody just needs e-commerce, I'm probably in the Shopify direction, because it's just there's so much is taken care of for you. You can go WooCommerce. Like I just consulted with a guy, and I did advise that he goes the WordPress direction, because he ultimately wants to have an LMS, a learning management system, which means the ability to take an online course, but not just like watch videos, actually have like quizzes and community and interactive elements, right? So WordPress has obviously a very strong plugin ecosystem that expands the functionality. And so if it's like there's a lot of different functionality needed, um, but it's all pretty well established stuff. Like I need a membership system, I need an LMS, I need an ecom, online store. Like those are very fundamental things. And so MemberPress is great for membership. WooCommerce is great for ecom on WordPress. I can't remember the LMSs I've used. I have to look back at it, but anyway, so WordPress can be good for that stuff. And the advantage of WordPress then is it's open source, and because you have custom plugins and themes, you can expand the functionality at will. So you can essentially you're building off of something that's pre-existing and you're custom deving. The downside is that you have all this bloat. So if you want a website that's going to scale up long term, and that's going to be highly efficient and custom tailored to the user. And there's a website called Page Speed Insights where you can see how fast it's from Google, and you can see like how fast, how good the accessibility is, all these things which affect your SEO ranking, by the way. Ideally you want to be all greens, or no more than one in the yellow. And that's really hard to do on a WordPress website or any CMS website. But you can pretty easily do it on a custom dev website because you're controlling everything that's triggering. So that's the difference there. And then Wix is very, very good for a lot of those things, like the e-commerce. I've been actually pleasantly surprised with Wix because I hadn't really touched it until about a year and a half ago, and it it's got, where you can do the online courses, you can do the e-commerce, the shopping, you can do membership and access to different things. You can do booking, scheduling, booking calendar. That's very effective, but also it's fairly extensible. They have really extensive APIs. You can use JavaScript and you can use their custom JavaScript framework called Velo. Really, it's an API to interact with it. And so you can actually do a lot more than you would think, proprietary system. Um, but it's pretty extent. And same thing with Shopify too. Is like with Shopify, you're bound to the API they've given access to, just like with Wix. But Shopify is a little more coder oriented, and Wix is a little bit more like approachable for the average Joe. Um, the downside of Wix right now, which this is going to change because Wix acquired Base 44, which is a vibe coding tool like Bolt or Lovable. But right now with Wix, you can't vibe code anything really. It's all drag and drop. So with WordPress, I can actually vibe code in Cursor. I can say like, I want the theme to do this, and I can just have the code generated. And so I can actually move a lot faster on a WordPress website or a custom dev website because of AI coding. But if touching code at all is scary for you, then Wix is definitely the place to be. Um, and then, yeah, I think that answers your question.
So I know like there's some other tools like maybe like Zapier that the someone who's not technically proficient, they may not even know what that does, but it's something that can bring tremendous value to a business just from the ability to automate a lot of tasks. So can you talk about some of
Yep.
the tools that small business owners, they may not be aware of, that you can kind of help them set up and that it can dramatically improve their workflow?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Zapier. I've been using it for over a decade. And before Zapier, like the first automation platform that I got to experience that was like drag and drop, no code automation platform was if this then that, IFTTT. And that was just, and they're still around, but they've gotten, back then I had like dozens of workflows on IFT that and I wasn't paying anything like 15 years ago. And then over time they've gotten extremely monetized, and you can have like maybe 5 workflows total. And but anyway, that like IFT is a good one for personal use and even a little bit of business use. But Zapier is kind of, you know, obviously focused on business enterprise. And so Zapier is super easy to use. I've built a lot of workflows, but like the best thing is, the thing I use the most probably is actually like creating a form in like Typeform or um, Gravity Forms is my favorite form tool, which is on WordPress though. So a lot of times, if it's not a WordPress website, then maybe I'm using Typeform or something else. Is it Woo Forms? Anyway, so with Zapier, most form systems you can connect in Zapier and say, when someone fills out this form, add their entry to a Google Sheet and send them an email from my Gmail account or Office or whatever email account, and send them this personalized email and then CC me. So a lot of times I'll do that because I want to know what email got sent out in my name. So I'll have it CC me so I see, and then that way I can also follow up with that person, right? So there's a lot of things you could do with that. But yeah, there's so many things. And then taking Zapier to the next level, last year I learned how to build my own triggers and actions because there was other apps that I was working with that didn't have an out of the box zap action or trigger. The difference is a trigger is like, something happens, like somebody makes a purchase on Shopify, that's a trigger, or somebody fills out a form, like something happens. An action is what happens after the trigger. What do I want to happen because of that, right? So I figured out how to create my own, and it was actually a little bit easier than I expected it to be. But anyway, so yeah, you can automate a lot more than you think you can in Zapier. And then for coders, you can take it like to another level where you're obfuscating, abstracting a lot of the extra backend stuff, and you're running through N8N or Celigo. Celigo is like really geared towards enterprise, but there's the same concept, like similar to Zapier. You're just creating these workflows. Zapier also has created a cool tool. A lot of these platforms are creating these canvas tools. Like even Apple has a free form now where it's just like an open canvas type of thing, and Canva has canvas, and but Zapier has a canvas tool now, and so you can like kind of draw out your workflows and like, okay, this happens and then this happens and this happens, and you can plug different apps in there, and you can create zaps, and you can really like mind map things out very effectively. And because it's native inside of Zapier, there's some advantages to that. So yeah.
So, I know like having a good looking website, having automated workflows is important, but if nobody can discover your product, then all of that is pretty much irrelevant because you're not going to generate any money. So,
Yeah.
you mentioned SEO, and you also mentioned like Facebook ads. How effective? You mentioned the Facebook ads in particular were very effective, but I know there's also other ad services. Are those just as effective, or like what is your strategy typically when you want to get a client more visibility?
Yeah, it depends on your market. So I talked about meta ads with Ice Barrel because it's a consumer product. If I'm like B2B, I would probably go for LinkedIn ads. If I'm, it depends on what your target audience is. So, younger generations, maybe TikTok and Snapchat. Um, Older generations Facebook. So depending on your audience, but the paid ads are expensive to really to be valuable. You have to put a lot of money, and I still think it's worth it, maybe like when you're starting out, to just put $50 a month into paid ads, just to kind of start that engine slowly. But you got to ramp up to get really effective there, and it's a long game. I was just listening to a podcast where they said, it used to be, and this was the case just 4 years ago. The statistic was a business needs 7 touch points with a prospect before the prospect will engage at all, not even closed deal, just like before they're really really engaging. And now it's 11, and that's continuing to increase. And so um, all these things work together. So if you have, when you get to the place where you can afford a billboard, and you got paid ads, and you're targeting people in the same area where that billboard is, and you've got connected TV ads, which is better than traditional TV, by the way, because with connected TV you can do some of the targeting similar to what you can do with social media ads. um, and so maybe and anyway, maybe you're doing all these different things, right? But you got to start somewhere. For me, I love networking because it's just like, I guess because I'm a good salesperson, and so if I can get in front of somebody and talk to them, and they'll just appreciate the vibes and connect, and then usually we can work out a deal if it's the right time for them. And so networking is my favorite, but also cold call sales. The thing about cold call sales is that you have to put in a lot of time. So like when I was doing cold call sales, I had to do 50 calls a day, basically 4 to 5 days a week, all through the month, right? So it's, let's say, about, let's just say 20 times 50. So it's, between 500 and 1,000 calls a month in order to get 24 24 people to show up on Zoom calls, not to close deal and have revenue, but to show up on Zoom calls. And then of that, maybe 1 to 3 would become a closed deal. So it takes a while to get there with cold call sales, whereas with networking, these people are looking to make good connections, right? Like, so it's just a very, very ripe field. But And then Business Made Simple University by Donald Miller is a great platform to like get kicked off with your business. They'll teach you a lot of things, and they have this airplane analogy. And so like the cockpit is the leadership of your organization, and the body is your operations expenses and all this stuff. But the main reason I bring it up is that a lot of airplanes have two engines, sales and marketing, but some airplanes have one engine. So sometimes you can get by on just sales or just marketing, right? And then there's also product led growth. If you're creating a product like HubSpot is a classic PLG. Like that's where most of their growth came from, is that they have a freemium model where you can get on and you can do a lot of things for free, but then you got to pay to increase your features. That's PLG. So, yep.
So, like in terms of the future landscape of web development and different tools for small businesses, can you tell us about some of the upcoming technologies that can really enhance a small business's workflow?
Yeah. Um, so Bolt.new is what I use to kick off any kind of website I'm doing. Even if I'm well, let me explain the whole workflow. Like, for example, I have a Wix client. So the client uses Wix, and they wanted a sales funnel landing page for a particular meta ad that had a particular focus, particular target audience. So what I did is I went to ChatGPT Deep Research, and I said, I gave it as much context about the client as I could, and I said, this is the funnel we want to build. I had actually used a crawler. I use a tool called Crawl for AI. It's an open source Python tool that will crawl a website and grab all the markdown. Don't worry about that, if you're not a coder. And it'll turn it into markdown. And so I'll like have a text file, a .txt file with as much information as I can about the business. I drop that into ChatGPT Deep Research, and I prompt it with like, build out a project brief for a sales funnel landing page. And I'll even say like, use concepts from, I can't even think of the names right now, but like the person who built ClickFunnels, like any kind of experts in the field, right? So like these different experts in the field, and use their concepts to create a project brief in a wireframe, just a text-based wireframe for a landing page. And the advantage of using ChatGPT Deep Research for this is that it can generate a really long output. If you just use regular ChatGPT, the output's going to be pretty short. With Deep Research, first of all, it's going to go out there and it's going to like really get all these expert insights and be effective on that piece of it. And it'll also look and do research on the industry itself, because you're telling it like, this business with this industry, this target audience. And so then once it finishes that, I'll either take that and drop it in Gemini, because Gemini has a very large context window, and I'll say generate a prototype of this, right? And it'll just generate raw HTML. And now I have kind of a guide that I'm like, okay, this looks great. And then I go back to Wix and I'm manually doing it. But what I'm like, the vision is fully laid out there. And so now I'm just, rebuilding it in Wix and tweaking it and designing it. Or so I'll go to Gemini, or I'll go to Bolt .new. That's my favorite. I've used Lovable, but I like Bolt the best personally. And I will drop in the entire prompt from ChatGPT, and I'll have it build out that website. And then I'll sync that to GitHub, and I'll open it up in Cursor, and then I'll continue tweaking from there, because Bolt's really good at that like first piece. But my point in bringing that up, even if you're not a coder, is just like prototyping things. Like, just brainstorm with ChatGPT or Claude, or Grok or DeepSeek. Like, brainstorm, and say, hey, ask me three, this is what I'm trying to do, ask me three questions that help me do it effectively. Or like brainstorm effectively, and then say, okay, now we're ready, build out a project brief, and then take it somewhere and prototype it. And so you can just like very quickly start to see things flesh out, where in the past you had to really like build things out slowly. um, Another tool is Gamma. I'm looking into. I haven't actually tried it yet, but supposedly it's pretty good for building out slide decks with AI. I'm also trying out GenSpark, which is supposed to be good for all kinds of different general purpose AI agentic workflows. Um, and if you're a coder, I use cursor agents specifically. So I'll literally like open up my phone, the cursor agent web app, and I'll kick off agents doing several different things on the same code base, and they'll all create different branches. So I'll have it working on several different features, and then I'll go back and manually merge and review the code and see if it's good. So those are some of the tools I'm using.
Awesome, man. And yeah, we're getting close to the top of the hour. So, before we get out of here, where can people find you? And if they want to work with you, like how would they be able to reach out to you, and what would working with you look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Johnhazel.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. Um, the that's the best place. You can email me at john@johnhazel.com. I'm not big on social media. I like need to be, but I just don't enjoy it at all. I'd rather connect in person. So I'm definitely more of a consumer than a contributor, but I'd love to connect on LinkedIn and just have a conversation and like honestly, like I said, it's the consulting. It's just helping people that I love. And so I love to just hear people's pain points and then see if there's any, even, I give so much free advice out, more than I should really, but that's what you have to do. There's a great book called The Go Giver, and it's like you start by just giving, and then you see if that turns into a contract or what. But I'd love to connect and just have a quick video call and find out your pain points and see if I can help.
Awesome, man. Yeah, it was great catching up with you and seeing everything you had to go on. And you shared a lot of amazing advice, man. But whenever you want to come back, just let me know. We'll get you back.
Cool. Sounds good. Thanks, Kevin.
And we'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. We'll catch y'all next time.
All right.